Hi everyone, Clear's Glory Young here. So I wanted to come on here and share something with you, something that I hope could really provoke your thoughts, right? So think about this. Have someone ever said something to you and you heard what the person said, but it didn't really dawn on you until like later on at another point where you're standing or sitting and you're thinking about what the person said and it just dawned on you? And it started to make sense. So back in college, I remember in one of my psychology classes where the professor at that particular time was actually being down to earth with us. And he was having a genuine conversation with us at that particular time. And I recalled that we were discussing about the different psychological practices that are available today and some of the things that we use in therapy. And I recalled him making the statement that majority of the psychological practices that are available today, one, they were developed by Europeans, right? And then two, they weren't developed for African American or black people, whatever you want to call us, right? He specifically said that. And I recall as we were talking about that, he was being down to earth. Like it was not about a professor and the students. It was like we're having a genuine conversation and discussion around these psychological things that are available to us today. And I recalled him saying that, hey, they were developed by Europeans, right? And number two, they weren't developed specifically for African American or black people, whichever you want to call us, right? So that was something that was said. I heard it, but it didn't dawn on me until this year. So this is going back to either 2014 to 2016 within that time frame. And we're now in 2022, right? But I'm looking at it from the contingency of some of the things that I'm now becoming aware of. So I was able to now look at another portion of my studies as I studied human services and psychology. So, studying human services and psychology, I learned about things from the cradle all the way to the grave, right? So, we are learning about, hey, what happened when a child is born, all the way throughout the child's life to an adult, all the way down to the grave, right? So, I learned about that. There was a point that I started to look at it. Yes, I'm getting this degree, and I started to put African American or black people to the side because I was observing something. And that observation was coming from all the things that I was learning and saying, hey, these were the things that were developed by such and such and such. I was like, all right, hold up. Let's put either black people or African American to the side, right? They said that Chinese people are smart. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, so Chinese people didn't contribute nothing to the world? Everything was just developed by Europeans? Like literally that was another part of the course that I was looking at because I'm sitting there and I'm like, majority of these things that I'm getting right from a learning standpoint, they're coming in from a European standpoint. And literally I started to one at one point like sitting there observing and I'm like, as I said, I'm like, all right, black people, African American, go to the side. Let's put us to the side because I know how America is like, all right, we are in this racial country and stuff like that. So they typically don't want to give black people credit for anything. So I'm like, all right, let's sit to the side. But at least they say, hey, Chinese people are smart. And I was looking at it as a joke, but it wasn't a joke in the sense that I'm saying to myself, you're telling me that not even Chinese people contributed anything to the development of the world from the cradle to the grave? Like majority of the things that I was hearing, it was just European, which actually made sense now to what the professor said, but this is in context around the psychological things that are available to us today. So that was one of the things that I was able to go back to now and help validate what the professor had said, right? Another thing that I went back to now, and I started looking at it at this year as well. So there was a point where I guess either black people or African American, or let's put it this way because this is how it was written, those who were enslaved. If you're not free as a person, right, then you were considered three-fifths of a person. So in the Constitution, it's saying that, hey, quote unquote, those who were not free, right? So who you think they were talking about? All right. So from there, they were saying if you weren't free, you were considered three-fifths of a person. So that even made sense to me now to say, hey, if these psychological things are being developed, then if you're not considered a person, then I'm not going to develop them for you. Right? But these are the things that we utilize today, right? To help us. All right. So that was another thing that I looked at. And then now I recalled I was doing a series of things around bullying in the community. And at one point I started to look at it and saying, all right, why is bullying so predominant in the African or African American community? And I'm saying to myself, but the stuff that I learned in college is like, yo, African American ain't that type of person like from the get-go. So I went on Google and I recalled that I did this. So I went on Google, I typed in basketball, and then I went to image. So if you know anything about Google, when you type in a certain subject matter, you can go there to the video, the image, or the shopping and stuff like that. So I recall I typed in basketball and I went to the image. And when I looked, I saw nothing but African American coming up. Yes, you saw other people, but it was predominantly African American. I typed in football, same thing. I typed in bullying, right? And when I went to the image, it wasn't us. So I'm saying, how does this become so prominent in the African American community? But when I go to the image and it's showing me the statistics, it's not really showing us. And literally, I was looking for pictures to really put in some type of presentation. And that's how I became aware of it. So when I looked at that, I was like, okay, so this is what goes on. The stuff that I learned in college, I started to make sense of it now, saying that, hey, when things are becoming a havoc in certain races and they can't deal with it anymore, they go and dump it into the other races. Get it? So this is how bullying now became something prominent in our African American community. So going back to now psychology and the things that the professor was saying that say, hey, these things weren't developed for us. So what happened now when it became a havoc in this community or in this race, as we would put it, right? It got dumped into this race. So now us as African Americans or black people, whatever you want to call us, right? We're utilizing these psychological practices today to heal ourselves, but they weren't developed for us. And we utilize them and we say, hey, they're working. And you know why you're saying they're working? Because you have nothing to compare it with. Because all you're seeing is just things that were dumped in us and gave us to utilize as practices that should heal us. But you have no comparison to see what is it that we used to use before these psychological things were given to us. So if you can do a comparison, so when you get whatever you get and you utilize it, it makes you feel good. Yes, you feel good, but did you really heal? So think about it, right? So let me just fast forward. So when I mentioned the concept now of saying, can the airport heal you? You may laugh at me, but who you think is really laughing? Because at the end of the day, I know what I'm talking about. And when you look at what we're being given today to utilize, it's not really working. But because you don't have anything to compare with, then you'll think that it's working, right? So think about it, really. The things that were developed weren't developed for us, so how could we utilize it to make our life better? Make sense? No, it doesn't. All right, so think about it. God bless.